call this meeting to order. Confirmation of the agenda that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby accepts the agenda for March 13th, 2020 budget meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? I have Paul. I have Anita second. All in favor? Carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we'll move on. Number 4 is the 2020 draft budget version 2, and Donna's actually going to go through 4, 5, 6. Maybe we'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Reeve Bailey and Council. So good morning. So here we are at version number 2 of the budget, and we'll see how far we get along today. Today we're not going to spend a lot of time until the end. If you have other questions, I want to make sure that you have any questions that we are unanswered. We want to make sure that we address those before we leave today. So in your package you had a summary of changes. So in the first version of the budget, the spending increase in dollars was $450,896.53, and that equated to 7.55% increase in spending dollars. So staff, and through the direction you provided through the modernization report and some of the other recent decisions that council has made, were incorporated into this draft too. So it resulted in a total of changes. Some of them were increases and some of them were reductions, but the net reduction was $273,545, which brings us down to a dollar spending increase on at 2.97%, or that equates to spending $177,351 more than we did last year. So we're going to talk about how we got there, because as you know, in 2020 we had some few major impacts that we really couldn't control, and those major impacts accounted to 4.32%. So one of the big ones was the OMPF reduction was $71,000. We had an increase in our insurance premium of $46,750. And our COLA and grid movements amounted to, it was just under $140,000. And then of course, as we moved on, there was the changes made from the modernization funds. So we'll talk about that on that summary of changes. So if you turn to that long sheet that I put on your desk, and you had it in your agenda package, and it is, again, it's entitled the Summary of Changes. So it's the one that shows the $177,000 at the bottom and the reduction of the $273,000. So I've divided this into categories, and the first category is increased revenue. So we had a bit of increased revenue. Marty upped a couple of items for revenue in his budget. And one of the biggest things here is, as we discussed, was the transfer from reserve to offset the Wingham policing. So as you remember from last meeting, we transferred it was actually turned out to be about $140,000. We transferred into reserves at December year end because the OPP didn't bill us for two things. One was the capital costs were significantly reduced, and then the operating costs. So we put all that money into a reserve because the Wingham people had paid that all through their area rating last year and the year before. The Wingham, because of the Wingham police, what we've had to deal with the last 2 years, the Wingham ratepayers, because of area rating, have seen some pretty significant increases, but we're able to mitigate that this year and give them some relief on that. So this $60,000 that we brought back out of reserves offset the increase in their operating costs on the contract. So that kind of leveled that piece out. And then of course now we don't have all that capital to pay for on a go-forward basis. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's a starting point there. For Moncrief Road, we, you'll see in the expense side, Sean increased that project from 45,000 to 95,000, but it really doesn't have any effect because then we're going to use more gas tax funds. And we then, as per the modernization report, we're now transferring, we put the whole modernization funds in the reserve at the end of 2019. Now we're taking out of that 124,000 for a number of projects, and then also $50,000 for the BCAs. So we had in the budget $30,000. There was in the first draft of the budget, if you remember, there was $10,000 for accessibility and $20,000 for the contract scanner person. So those impacted the budget, but then we offset those by modernization funds, which then that is helping to this reduction on a go-forward basis. And then the other projects that we added through the modernization report were like an in and out because we added them into this budget, but they also were offset by modernization, so they didn't impact us. So also, just recently then we heard that we are getting the funding for the service delivery review project in the amount of $75,000, and then you'll see it in the added expense part. So that's the increased revenue that we're working with, and that amounts to about $375,000. So once we move into the increase-decrease expenses, there's a number of some small things and a few large things that I want to point out to your attention. So as I said, the service delivery review project is there at $75,000, but it's offset by the grant, so it really doesn't impact taxation. We were directed to add $35,000 to the budget for the trailer park site condition assessment, so that's been done. And moving down further on that list, as I said, there's a few $100s here and there that were made for in regard to once the year-end numbers were reviewed in more detail by the department heads, then they changed water and sewer by $30 and changed the propane and waste and things like that. Nothing that significant. But one that was significant was we added $26,500 for the electrical work that needs to be done over at the old Armories building. So that was an addition. And as well, the LAS road assessment was an addition of $10,000. We had some adjustments on, we had to add in some Wingham Park wages and benefits. That isn't a new person. We just, in the first draft, hadn't added that person's wages into the parks budget. We had to make sure that it got put in for this round for sure. And a little small increase for Maitland Valley Conservation. And we were able to remove, we had rent in twice for Sacred Heart School, which we got the rental contract figured out there. And Moncrief Road, as I said, this $50,000 extra doesn't impact the budget because we are using additional gas tax. And then we were able to reduce the tax write-off account. We reduced the election expense, some health and safety, and legal and accounting. So this whole section is actually increasing our budget by about $208,000. So the next section is water and sewer, and so with most of these don't impact, the one item does, but the as you know, council has directed the BM Ross to undertake the design study for Hutton Heights. So I've added in the cost for water and sewer for the portion that's left that we haven't paid, and so that though is offset from reserves. And one item I had to add in, which was a change, was the sewer at the wastewater. There was a facility air exchanger which had to be added in as a transfer from reserve. So that did make a slight change in water and sewer. So when we move on to the modernization funds, so I separated this just to refresh our memories on this. So we had in the budget originally So this is just changes to version 1. So in version 1, we had $20,000, but council agreed to up that to 30. So the additional 10,000 was added in. The records management training was added in, the folding inserting machine added in, municipal site security was added in, the live streaming camera. And if you remember, we had $10,000 in accessibility renovations or investigations added into the budget, but we've now upped that to 50, so the additional 40 is added in, and we've added in the basement renovations. But as I said, this whole 94,000 plus the 30 that was previously in there adds up to the 124,350 that you see at the top there as a transfer from reserve. So that is the changes relating to the modernization fund. So then some budget cuts as senior staff we went through, and a combination of things. We said to ourselves, okay, what can we reduce here, and what projects do we just not have time to get done anyway? So we had to take a tough look at things, and so the building condition assessment, Sean had alluded to already that he was going to be able to reduce that by 20,000 down to from 70 to 50, and again that's covered by the modernization funds now as approved by council. The lighting retrofit project Sean has pulled completely, as the same with the Crookshank Park clock has been pulled. Transfer to reserves for roads, Sean had originally intended to put $100,000 into reserves for both equipment and capital, and he has reduced that down to 50. Originally we had, we were going to put away 110 towards the roof and 30 towards projects that Vicky was undertaking at the complex, and Sean reduced his piece by $50,000 on the roof piece. So the roof is not going to be done this year, obviously, and we're going to be saving to do that. Now, there is a bunch of work being done down there. Sean explained all that, so we'll see how that goes. And then this piece is saving for the next part of that project. And then Sean, in working with the Blythe BIA, reduced the Blythe parking initiative from 35,000 to 25,000, so there's $10,000 off there. So those reductions add up to about 216,000. So when you add those all up, the pluses and the minuses, it reduces our spending by 273,000, which brings our spending increase to 177,351, and as I said, that equates to 2.97%. So let's talk about this. Is there any discussions or any questions that you have on any of these items?
Excuse me. Excuse me. The roads, we're reducing it from 100 down to 50. I know I'm a stickler for keeping the taxes down, but when it comes to the roads, the East Wawanosh ward is suffering terribly with the road conditions they have. I'm wondering, and I want maybe Sean can speak to this, if that was if we could maybe add that back in and see how that works out. Every year we and I'm thinking of capital, like of actually doing the roads, not equipment. Every year we seem to have to cut capital, and it always ends up being the roads. And we must all confess that we need to do something with the East Wawanosh ward as well as our villages and our town. I'm just wondering how the council feels about adding that.
So if I may though, first, what we did though is we took for East Wawanosh roads, we part of this was increasing that by 50. So we did increased the East Wawanosh Moncrief Road project. It was only 45 in the first budget, so now we bumped it up then to 95. So we put the 50 up into the Moncrief Road project.
Thank you kindly for explaining that.
Sorry, Sean, did you want to add anything? Okay. Okay, so, again, is there any questions on, we can come back to this sheet if we need to, but that, I just wanted to explain to you in detail how we got from point A to where we are now at point B. And then if we have to, we'll see where we go for the next step. Okay, so the next is, I gave, in your package then, the next page is a budget summary. And again, sorry for the small print there, but what I tried to do is summarize the whole budget on a teeny little page for you, so that you kind of have a snapshot of it that you can sort of save yourself looking through the whole budget. So what this does is it summarizes the revenue for 2020, the expenditures for 2020. The difference is the amount that's raised on taxes in 2020. And then I've compared that to the amount raised on the 2019 taxes. So when you go through your budget, each line has that percentage change. But this just basically summarizes it by category, so you can kind of at a glance see where the changes were. So one of the main things, there's 3 or 4 I want to point out to you, and of course the biggest one is the Wingham Police. So as I said, you see a reduction in the police department, which does include East Wawanosh and the building. And so you see a reduction of $266,000, but when we run it through the area rating process, it actually makes quite a large difference for Wingham on the area rating, and I'm going to get into that on another page or two. But as I said, it certainly makes a big difference for Wingham now that we don't have those capital costs one-time capital costs to pay for. So as I said, they paid for them last year, and now they're getting a bit of a break on it, which will be a one-time break. So I'm just going to explain this a little bit further while I'm on this roll. So they will get a bit of a break this year, but because when you're comparing last year to this year, because of those capital costs, but that won't continue because now we're just paying the flat contract cost. And so we saw an increase in the contract due to their cost of living and et cetera, that's $60,000. But again, we were able to mitigate that by a transfer from reserve. So what their costs will be for next year for the contract should be in line with what they are this year. Again, no capital, but we do expect them to have cost of living again next year. And that's why when we transferred that money to reserve at the end of 2019, because I knew that they were going to have a reduction this year, I didn't give them the whole reduction this year because I want to spread it out there's no sense having big blips and going way down this year and then back up next year. So a couple other things that may happen is the whole police board contract situation is under review. We may have a better handle by the end of this year for the 2021 budget, how that's all going to affect us. I don't know if it will or not, but we shall see. The other thing that may affect Wingham for next year would be that I think the OPP are finding that the 7 full-time officers, those hours that equate to that, they're not actually able to use them in some cases. So we are thinking there is a possibility if they can't use all those hours we're paying for, we may see a reduction there too, a reconciliation. We'll have to pay the whole contract amount, and then it's possible, but I'm not banking on it. We'll have to see how that goes. But I'm just saying there are some changes, and until, I don't know, Trevor, if you can speak to that any further, or...
The discussion that the police board has had with the detachment commander is exactly that. There is a reconciliation at the end, at least of his understanding about the hours that are being utilized in the municipality under the Wingham ward versus calls for service outside of the Wingham ward, and then and then it'll be looked upon through the municipal policing bureau to do that reconciliation. So the contract is what the contract says. That's why in the agreement or the proposal or the detachment commander's report that comes to council, there is a report that tells you how many hours they're in, because the schedule, the contract indicates that they're supposed to provide X amount of hours. And I think ultimately, let's the elephant really in the room is the Wingham police officers the Wingham police had 7 officers, and we wanted the OPP to ensure that they had a job when the Wingham police was gone. So it wasn't miraculous that the number came out to 7 officers in the contract. Let's call a spade. Like, that was the arrangement with the OPP, is hope that they would keep all of the officers, so that there would be no cost reduction, no employment loss. That was the intention of the entire contract, the entire discussion with the Wingham Police Service. So, at the end of the day, I think that is a possibility. The Wingham Police Service, or the North Huron Police Services Board, is going to have to be very cautious about what hours are being used, because we don't want them used. We don't want the OPP using them in a way so that they get the benefit of saying they've used the hours, but at a lower, not on a call per service volume, meaning basically they're doing ride checks and stuff, other things that are important, but ultimately those things just add to hours and are a benefit to the community. But we would rather, I think the Wingham police or the Wingham ratepayers would rather it be on calls for service. If they need somebody, if they need a police officer in the town of Wingham, then those are the hours they're willing to pay for. Not always are they just wanting multiple ride checks in order to build up hours in order for the contract to be covered. So I think ultimately at the end of the day, council and the board are going to have to be cognizant of what the hours are being used and how those are based on call for service, so that we can understand that when we get to that point to the end of this contract, that the treasurer knows what that potentially is going to look like.
Would it be different for if the officers go to the schools more or do some patrol around the schools? Is there any difference, because it still will be OPP and kids from everywhere go to the school?
Yeah, no, those are all treated as calls for service,
Okay.
depending on how the contract is
Yeah.
read. Those are like the Wingham Police Service did that same thing. Like, they did
Yeah.
the same thing within the municipality. Those are all part of the services that they offer.
Okay.
But it's really the discussion about everything is a value add. Like, everything is a value add. I believe that. I truly believe that whatever they're doing, whether ride checks or safety patrols or stuff like that, it's all a positive. The conversation though is that contract states a number of hours that they're supposed to provide to the town of Wingham. So the concern is that it has been brought to my attention a couple of times by ratepayers and stuff, is that's fine that they have a number of hours, but we want those hours to be realistic. Don't just say that you're paying 1,900 hours and then you've put 1,900 hours in, but they're not 1,900 useful and value added hours, because then all it is just we're paying for something we really didn't need.
Yeah.
So that's the concern that ratepayers are telling me. We just got to be cognizant of that discussion, and I think the detachment commander has been very open with us and honest about this is a new thing for them as well. Like, yeah, it's not a new thing for the OPP as a whole, but it's a new thing for this area, because not a lot of our areas have had these contracts and had to switch from a police service to the OPP in any given time. So.
Go ahead, Chris. Through you, really quick. Trevor, I guess the past Wingham police, we were just doing them as much of a favor as we could. I hope they understand that, as far as asking OPP that hopefully these folks get a job. So that was just a favor. I don't know how they can reconcile the number of service hours to the number of people. That must be difficult. And where I'm getting at is it was $60,000 extra fees today, like this year, right? Where does that come from? Like, it must be difficult to figure all that out.
So to answer your question, Chris, part of the discussion has been, that is exactly, that report that is in the detachment commander's report that talks to hours, that has been a work in process over the last year.
Yeah.
Because what happens is how they report, so they have to do a call, like they have to do a time sheet, if you would want to call that, to simplify it. And they have to specify exactly where they are, what they're
they
doing,
did.
all that stuff. And all that goes into a database that is reported to the municipal policing bureau to do an analysis and a review of costing. That is different than how they were reporting it to the police services board, because they didn't because of the discussion of how people are reporting. And let's be clear, they're all new to the OPP and how that structure works. So they didn't have to do what they were doing today before. They were being paid by North Huron. It didn't matter it mattered, but they weren't doing a timesheet specifically for every court cost and everything that they were doing, at least that I'm aware of. They're having to do that now because their costs are being spread over a number of different communities on different contracts, on different rates. So this municipal policing discussion is a larger discussion that I think if we need somebody to come to talk to this council about how that's going to reconcile, the detachment commander has said very clearly, he will ask somebody from the municipal policing bureau to come and talk to that, but I don't think that's a discussion for today. But that's exactly right. You're exactly correct that it is a big concern about hours and how everything's being allocated, because we don't necessarily know. We just want to know, and I think the ratepayers in Wingham and East Wallace and Blythe want to know, when you call 911, there's going to be somebody there, and there's going to be somebody there a lot. And they're going to be there fast. That's all that anybody really wants from a police service and an emergency service. They want to know when they call, they can get it. And that's, again, at the end of the day, the whole impression that we're hoping to leave with North Huron. That when they call, they're coming. And they're not coming one, they're coming multiple.
Okay, thanks. So also moving on then, another item I was just going to point out is that street lighting overall is down, which affects Blythe and Wingham area ratings, so they're getting a bit of a break there, and that's because based on the hydro consumption, we were able to reduce the hydro costs there. The next one, one of the next ones that probably have one of the biggest impacts in dollars, but doesn't impact the budget per se, is water and sewer. So for this year, you'll see a huge change in water and sewer, even though, as I said, it's user pay. But we're doing some huge sanitary sewer projects. So over the past, and you'll see it on the next page as well. So in 2019, the total water and sewer projects were estimated at $383,000, and we didn't do those projects, because most of them, because they were relating to Carlin Terrace. But this year, we're doing $1.4 million in water and sewer projects. And so that is having a big change on the difference between operating and capital. So, as I said, that's another big change.
So Don, I just want to reiterate for people who are, so that is raised by user pay. Correct. Not taxation.
Yes, that's
so right. It's because it's in the column that's taxation. Obviously, user pays is another form of taxes. Correct. But that whoever is using the system is being charged that. It's not on your municipal tax bill.
That's right. But what happens is when you're looking in straight dollars at capital versus operating, the capital dollars are way up. Absolutely. Because it's included in there.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. And so then when you go down to community centers, it's up $140,000, and one of the biggest points there is that what I just spoke to is that Sean and Vicky are transferring an extra $50,000 into reserve for that future roof project. So that was just another item that I wanted to bring to your attention. And the last one there that I also wanted to speak about too is, as per the strategic plan, council's priority is is on economic development. So you see that on taxation, we're raising an additional $93,000 this year towards the various economic development projects. So, and 40 of that was the CIP project, and you had Hutton Heights and some of those. So, as I said, this was just a little sheet I created as a budget summary as a glance sheet, so that you could sort of see some of that quickly without going through the whole budget. Okay, so then leading into operating and capital, as I was just saying, on the operating side of things, our revenue is up, which is because we're using more money from transfer from reserves on that modernization money, and transferring from reserves for the water and sewer projects. So our operating is down in dollars and our capital is up. And then again, I just wanted to reiterate that the water and sewer projects are quite significant this year. They're up over $1 million. So as I said, we've spent very little money on water and sewer this last few years, planning for these big projects that we have coming up, being Carling Terrace, the dechlorination, the work on the standpipe, and the what was the other project, Sean? My mind just went blank there. The other capital project in water that we had, the dechlorination, the Carling Terrace, the pardon? Carling Street, yeah, I said that. It was the, there's that facility air exchanger, SCADA. I couldn't remember that, SCADA, yeah. So that was in there. Okay, so then we'll move into what I wanted to do here over the next few slides. So in what I have done every year, and on your tax rate sheet that's in your budget, I follow this particular residential property. Now this particular property is in Wingham, but we look at it, okay, what if this property was in Blythe, and what if it was in East Wawanosh? And it's the same, then we'll go through a commercial property, and then we'll go through a farm property. So just so that you can see if this same property was in each of the wards, what it would do, because the base rate affects the amount as well as area rating, and the assessment increases. So it's really hard to say like what one property, no one property is the same. So you have to look at a bunch of samples to get a feel for how things are going to go. So as I said, last year, because of the impact on the policing, we cut so much out of the budget that Blythe and East Wawanosh saw a real benefit and actually saw some reductions. There was really just no way around it, and again, that was an anomaly really, because you know, in the real world, with all the cost of living and all that, the taxes don't go down. So as I said, but it worked out because we cut back so much to try to mitigate for Wingham, that as I said, Blythe and East Wawanosh saw some relief last year, which isn't going to be the case this year. And so then Wingham, as I said, is now going to see some one-time relief because of on the area rating, and their total area rating is down $315,000. So it's 60, and then plus that $60,000. That includes that $60,000 transfer from reserves. So definitely that is going to be a one-time help for Wingham. And again, so we'll go through here. So as I said, also Blythe, and then on top of that, we reduced the hydro costs for Blythe and Wingham street lighting, so they've both seen a small benefit for that as well. And so on area rating though, East Wawanosh is up slightly due to our reduction in OMPF. So over the last few years, we had allocated $10,000 of the OMPF for quite a few years to the East Wawanosh ward to level out their tax rates. And with the reductions that we've seen in OMPF, I didn't do that this year. So it makes a bit of an impact on East Wawanosh, not dramatic of course, but it is definitely a bit of a impact there. So let's go through these properties and have a look. So I'm talking only the municipal portion now, not the county and school boards. That's on the next slide. So we're just looking at what decision, the decision of this budget, the decisions that you've made so far today, what that would do to this particular property. So in Wingham, this particular property would go down $104. If it was in Blythe, it would go up $136. And if it was in East Wawanosh, it would go up $164. So how do we get to that? So if you look at the bottom part of your slide, it would show you that our budget increase for Wingham would have actually let this property go down to $136, but because it had an assessment increase, the assessment increase equated to $32.31. So between the two items, then the net result on the municipal portion would be that this property in Wingham would go down $104.07. So same thing for Blythe. The budget alone would have seen this property go up $111.38, and if it was in East Wawanosh, it would have went up $142. But because the assessment went up, then Blythe would have added another $25 for assessment related, and East Wawanosh another $22. So Blythe, this municipal portion of this property would go up $136, and East Wawanosh, this same property would go up $164. So that's a residential property. So then I want to move to the next page, which shows you the total result, which includes in the county and education. And because the county and education rates have gone down, it helps to bring the overall total down. And so then therefore, on the total tax bill that would go out, Wingham would this particular property would see a total decrease of $121.18. Blythe would see $119.35, and Blythe would see an increase of $119.35, and East Wawanosh would see an increase of $147.37. Okay, so then, and that was a slight change. I made one change from when the budget was posted. It was a very slight change, so those numbers are out. These are the numbers I want you to look at, and they're different by, $4 or $5. So. Okay, so then we're going to move on to a commercial property on the next page. So this commercial property is in Wingham, but again, we looked at it as if it was, what if it was sitting in each of the wards. It had an assessment increase of $9,750. So again, municipal portion, it would go down $464 in Wingham, up $624 in Blythe, and it would go up $750 in East Wawanosh. And then how do we get there? So our budget increase for Wingham would have actually seen this property go down $618, but the assessment would have put it up $154, so the net decrease is $464. And the same then for Blythe. Our budget would have put it up $504, but the assessment put it up an additional $119, so that's how we get to the $624. And in East Wawanosh, our budget would have put it up $643. The assessment put it up $106, and so the total for municipal would have gone up $750. But if you flip the page to the total, then it comes down some because with factoring in the county and the education, then it would go down a total, the total tax bill on this one would go down $774 in Wingham, it would go up $313 in Blythe, and it would go up $439 in East Wawanosh. So that's an actual commercial property. Okay, so then we're gonna flip to a farm property. I actually wish I hadn't used this property for the public meeting. For the public meeting, when we get to that point, I won't use this property. And the reason for that is because this property did have an assessment increase, had a big assessment increase, but also had an assessment increase due to the addition of a building. So, as I said, I won't, I'll pick a property when we get to the public meeting that doesn't have that building added into the mix too, because it just one more thing to make it confusing. So if this farm was in Wingham, which it's not, then it would have seen, it would have seen an increase of $530. If it was in Blythe, it would have seen $1,171, and it is in East Wawanosh, so it would be $1,194. So when you look at that down below, the budget part of it, we would have given a decrease based on our budget, but the assessment increase was $1,000, and so then that's where you get to a total of $530.28. And the same for Blythe, the budget would have put it up $389, but the assessment put it up $781 more. So that's how we got to the $1,171. And the same in East Wawanosh. Our budget alone would have put it up $496, but the assessment put it up $697. And so that's how we got to the $1,194. But when you flip it over to the totals, then in Wingham, it would go up $850, Blythe $1,491, and East Wawanosh $1,514. So as I said, I had made a minor change there, so the tax sheets that you had attached to the agenda, they're out a few dollars to the tax sheets that you have here. So, and then we're gonna look at the further sample properties to see how that looks as well. So I just gotta get caught up to here. So, almost done. Bring that sheet with me. I lost my sample property sheet for some reason. Oh, I didn't. Good. Okay. So if you turn to the page that is on your desk there for sample properties, and so what I've done here is, as I said, it's each property, the impacts are so different. So that's why we try to discuss a fair number of properties, just so you can have see how, you know, if the assessment goes up, how that affects it, and if the assessment only goes up a little or not at all, how that affects it. So these further tax samples, again, the top four, are all in Wingham. So these are actual properties. So the first one, the assessment went up 1.26%, but it would still see a reduction of $123.74 overall because of the policing that we've talked about. And again, that would be a one-time shot because we won't expect that for next year for Wingham. And the second property had a less than 1% increase in assessment, so it went up go down 87.21. The third one had no increase in assessment, but this property had a big increase in assessment last year. So it would go down 147. And then this commercial property that we've been talking about here, it would have the same, it would go down the same amount, 774,000. It would go down, and because it is a actual Wingham property, so that's what would happen to it. In Blythe, again, they are, although the area rating went down, they still see an increase because we are raising more money on our budget than last year. And so in Blythe, the one property, the assessment went up 3.64, So that translates to overall increase of $183. The second property, which was assessed higher, went up 1.9%, so it has an increase proposed of about $201. And then this farm property in East Wawanash has two components. The house went up 4.18%, which would translate to 210, which is, you know, similar to the Blythe. And then, but the farm piece, as I said, sees a pretty significant increase because the assessment went up 9.8%, but not just because the assessment went up, it went up also because of the new building. So as I said, I won't, it gives you the idea behind it, but I wouldn't, as I said, when we move forward to the public meeting, I'm not gonna use this property because I think it just adds another layer of confusion, so I wish I had picked something differently there. Okay, so then what I'd like to do next is to move on to taxation raised by ward. So this is again is in dollars, so this just shows you that overall, for this year, our total taxation raised in dollars is $9,573,000 plus the flat rate street rate of $6,900. So our overall levy is $9,579,000, as opposed to last year. Our overall levy was $9,386, so that's the difference of the $177,000. And so it makes a difference, as you know, with that big drop in area rating. Then we'll be collecting, Wingham residents would be paying 55% as opposed to last year at 58%. Blythe would be paying a tiny bit more, 17.6 versus 16.69, and East Wawanash would be paying slightly more dollars coming out of there, 26.96 versus 25. And as I said, there's several factors there. It's the area rating plus the increase in assessment that we've seen in East Wawanash. Now, I do expect to see, we hope to expect to see this farm assessment settle down. Because residential, I believe, with all the houses are selling like hotcakes, and the prices are way more than what you would think these properties would sell for. So that's going to work itself through the whole market value assessment, and residential is going to see, it's only a matter of time until residential sees some of the shift back to them as well. So I can't predict, just when that will happen, but we're seeing it on a few properties. What happens is some of these properties that people have owned for years, they don't see a big difference, but once that property sells, and it might have been assessed for 175, it sells for 320, and that's like we're seeing some of those big swings, and so that's going to push the residential. It's definitely, you're going to start seeing some of that as a trend for sure. So,
but that's the issue is that you're not going to see that until a sale,
right?
Or MPAC does a market review of where they're actually taking a house that's sold, comparing it to the house that hasn't sold, and said this is what that house is. The issue has always been when MPAC sends that notice about your property, it specifically says the assessment number that is on your assessment should be the number that you are able to sell your house for.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you right now, it isn't. It isn't because they're not doing a comparison of the houses that are in the market compared to what has been sold to the houses that are actually in that haven't been sold. They're waiting for sale prices to change MPAC's assessment. That's what they're using. If they're saying anything different, I would love to tell them that it's not, because they're not doing a market assessment. Because if they were, we as in municipalities wouldn't want people to walk. Why do people ask municipalities to go around, do door to door to look to see if things have been done to their house? Because you don't want somebody to do that, because that's going to raise taxes and it's going to raise people's issue about how municipalities get more money out of ratepayers. So, but MPAC isn't doing a market assessment. I will tell you that, and if they are, I guarantee you there will be lots more appeals. And I would argue that there hasn't been as many appeals as I would expect, because that is not what's happening, at least not in the residential. It might be in the farm, but there's not more farms being sold now than there was in the past. Residentials aren't being, because the supply is very limited, so the market isn't selling as much to get that market assessment. That's my opinion, because I've moved houses and I've looked at them, and people say, well, when I tell them exactly that, what does your assessment say? Well, your assessment says that's what you should sell my house for. That's what you should get for your house in the market. And they look at me like I've just had 6 heads and said I'd never put my house in the market for that, because the market is more. And I'm saying, well, aren't you getting a good deal then? Because that's what you're getting. Like that's the reality of the world. You're getting a deal because MPAC hasn't assessed what the true value of your house is.
They're closing the gap.
Yeah, they are.
They're closing the gap, but they're closing the gap over 5 years. They take the increase and they spread it over 5 years.
Yeah, it's
Or
diff-
4.
Yeah, it's different on the farm. It's raising up fast.
It is my understanding that Huron County is up for a impact review in September, so everything will be reassessed.
Yeah, they'll be
Again.
starting the reassessments again, so.
And
I think I sent out to, Carson, did we send out that impact, information session to, are we putting that on the agenda for council for Monday night?
I think the county is.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's yeah, it might still be sitting in my email.
Okay, well, there's lots of, impact information starting already to explain how things are gonna go, so it's worthwhile for you to take a look at those and, see where that's gonna land for sure.
And for the taxes going up because of new building at the farm property, it is also bringing, I think that's a good example for the whole community, because if we were going to build new houses at Maitland Estates, taxes will go up, we will get more income, and hopefully that will lower our taxes overall.
Yeah, that's.
I think this is a good example. It's very painful for the people who have to pay it,
Yeah.
but
Right, and again, sorry Bernie, is, so we're finally getting our chance, and when we talk on Monday night about the, development charges statement that's coming forward, we're finally getting our chance on some of this development with the new McDonald's, all the Rutledge subdivision. We haven't had that in years, and so, like, obviously those assessments haven't come through to us yet, but as they start coming through for the 2021 budget, that's going to be, great. And then, who knows with, all the discussions and things that are going on, like, it's exciting that, we may finally see some relief on some of this. And the good part of it is too, is that for the most part, I think we're well positioned in that we have a lot of everything, that to make it attractive for people with the community centers and the libraries and the parks and the trails and all of that. We offer way more programs, and I don't think that even 500 to 1,000 more people isn't really going to, we're not gonna have to build another arena, good heavens, we've got, you know what I mean, we're fully, we've certainly got capacity there, and so anyway, I think we're gonna be well positioned. Let's cross our fingers that this development continues, because it's certainly welcome, and we haven't had that to help us over the past, so.
We are comparing the same house or in this first picture, like
Yep.
why is it more expensive in Blythe and in East Wallace? Is it just because of the police, or is it, is it assessment? What makes the same house go up in taxes in Blythe and East Wallace and down in Windham?
Well, the difference is for this year is, as we've said, our spending has gone up,
Yeah.
which that's what's translating through to Blythe and East Wawanosh. And Wingham would have went up too, had we not had this whole huge separate reduction in area rating. So it's the increase in spending working its way through, and then as I talked about the OMPF in East Wawanosh, so yeah, those two items.
Donna, can I
Thank you.
follow up on that a bit, because this is where it gets a little confusing. So because we're the ward system, we gather different amounts of money from 3 different wards, which is where you're getting the difference in pricing on what a house is worth in Blythe, East Wawanosh, or Wingham, because we're the ward system. But we do take all that money and we group it together and spend it as a group equally, wherever it's needed to be. If we weren't a ward system, and we were all just one big community, then would we not be talking about a house is gonna go up 2%, whether it's in East Wawanosh? See what happened there, guys? So that's why, it's because of the ward system. And I'm not saying pro or con about a ward system, because we need to look at that further. But that's really why it is, because you're still collecting money in separate pots, depending on what's going on. So that's what it is, okay?
Okay, so then on this slide that's up next is that, I'm just showing you here that, it's a slight change, but, 64% of what we collect on the total tax bill stays here in North Huron as opposed to 63.5 last year. We send 23.72% off to the county, as opposed to 23.75% last year. And then we send over to the boards of education 12.14% as opposed to 12.67. So not a lot of change there, but it shows you that the majority of the taxes on the tax bills stay here in Wingham. And as you know, then the tax bill has the county and education portions on it, and we have to pay the school boards and the county whether we've had it collected from the people. So it's just showing you those sorts of changes. So for next steps for the budget then, so I want to have some discussions now. So I want to get your feedback on what I have presented to you today. And if council has any further or proposed changes, then what we'll do is we'll schedule another meeting. And we would still aim for adopting the budget at the April 20th meeting. So hopefully whatever changes that you, if you have some that we discuss and you give me direction on, we'd still like to see the budget passed in April no matter what. And then if you're comfortable enough with this budget and you don't feel there's any further changes required, we would look to adopt the budget in principle, and we would prepare the presentation, and then we would adopt the budget at the April 6th meeting. So one way or another, I definitely would like to make sure that we get this budget adopted in April. So
what we're gonna do now is I'd like to go around the horn. I'd like to hear everybody's opinion on the 2.97% tax increase and how they feel they would like to move forward with it or make changes. And Anita, if you don't mind, I think we'll start with you today.
Yeah, I do mind.
Paul, it's your turn. No.
No, I need a little bit more time.
Okay, Chris?
I'm pleased that that you're able to, you know, lower your requests and get the budget down to something that we mentioned earlier that we, you know, could live with. One thing I'd like to know though is what's left in reserves. You know, we don't wanna deplete it. You know, certainly it's gonna be going up and down as years go by, but we need to be careful that we don't, it doesn't go too low.
For sure, and so, the auditors, because of the weather, the auditors didn't get through the audit there. But I expect them to be done that soon, so I could certainly email you out. And normally what we do is we have a good hour discussion on reserves. So, what I would do is for one of these two meetings, I would definitely, they would be done with it by then for sure, and we'd have that good discussion, just to give you the confidence of where our reserves are at. Because if you remember, we transferred at the end of 2019 some pretty significant amounts to reserves, and we are using some of that this year, but they're still in good shape. But I do like to have that as a separate discussion for sure.
And to add, it is a total frustration at this point. I know you mentioned that assessments, change, and I've heard it. A couple of us have heard it before from somebody else that, residential carried the weight earlier, many years ago, and now it's farmland. But it's really out of whack. Assessments on farm properties are huge, and the amount of dollars that East Wabash is putting into the system. I'm just, I'm complaining. We can't do anything about it. I just want to make it publicly known that we're quite upset by the way things are set right now, because it's totally the weight that farmers are putting in as tax dollars is pretty heavy, and it's hard to bear for some.
Certainly. Now, may I ask you this question? So, I haven't seen as many farm property sales as what we had. Now, maybe in your circles, you do see a lot of properties selling. And the few that I had looked at last year, the prices were just ginormous. The sale prices were ginormous. So is that settling down? Are the prices coming down at all? Do you see on any of your neighbors and friends that are selling?
No.
Land
No.
prices will never come down.
Not now.
They're like, no.
They won't level out.
It's just like we have a lot of grain and beef farmers in East Walnut, and they are hurting tremendously right now because they didn't get the crops off. Propane wasn't available because of the CN strike. Then they had the beef farmers were affected by the closing of the slaughter plant. They can't get rid of the cattle. They're getting too big, too small. It's just they're hurting a lot right now.
Mhm.
And I think it would be very helpful if you can put another property than this one on there to see what the effect on them would be.
Mhm.
What
Because
kind
that
would you
is
go
more-
for though? It
Mm.
should be just a
Yeah.
nice cash crop farm. Actually, you're dealing with two types of farming.
Mhm.
A livestock farm, and maybe they didn't build a new barn last year, you can go with that, but there should be a cash crop farm as well.
Well, if you would even give me a sample of another property that someone, like, a property that you know well, if you just
You can
tell
do
me
that,
the
yeah.
person's name, then I can look it up, and then, like, we don't put those names on anything
No,
though,
we don't.
here, but
No.
it just, when we do the samples,
Yeah.
it would resonate with you folks more than, so I'm happy to do that if you give me that information.
Yeah. But to just make a comment to Trevor, what you mentioned earlier about assessments, I don't mind saying that, we have a 100-acre farm and they assessed it double to what we could have ever gotten in our dreams. Because they just looked around and, there's a 100-acre farm, it's sold, it's 5 miles away, and it's sold for some stupid price, and that one sold for a stupid price, too high. So all of a sudden, this farm here should have a stupid assessment on it. that's what they did. It's called, what I call is sitting at your desk and deciding what assessments are gonna be, and I hated that. I understand that they don't have enough staff to go out to every single farm, but every single farm is different, just like every single person is different. They have no concept of that, so, you know, consequently, we appealed, did all right, and now it's where it should be. So I really encourage farmers, and maybe residents who think they're too high, appeal, because they'll listen. Just make your case really strong.
But Chris, that's my.
No, we're not gonna,
Sorry.
we're not gonna have a conversation. I wanna go around the horn and get everybody's opinion, Trevor, and then we'll, okay?
What was the question again?
How you feel about the 2.97 increase and how we put everything together?
Well, everything goes up. I am thankful for all the hard work that went into this. Make it easier for us as councillors, township.
Okay? Okay, Trevor, now it's your turn, sorry.
No, no apology needed, Reeve. Yeah, I think ultimately at the end of the day, this is a budget that at least we have some background to, that we can support from a spending perspective, adequate information about what we need to do in order over the next year. And we've got some significant things in here to grow this municipality from an economic development perspective. And I think that's the mark for me is if we can start getting some positives out of that kind of money in economic development and share those positives to ratepayers throughout the year and get, you know, Maitland Estates and that type of stuff, we have enough infrastructure today to support the developments that we're putting in today. Like, we don't have to add anymore else. We've got enough. So, you know, to add all that tax base potentially and not have to increase the spending a whole heck of a lot in order to survive, to service those ratepayers, that is going to make what I have been saying and what the Reeve has been saying and everybody on council for the last 25 years has been saying, if we can get more people in this municipality, it's going to level load taxes to be a lot more economical, so that this discussion about North Huron having the highest taxes in the world can hopefully stop. At the end of the day, we can't achieve. The only thing that I've always said is, let's put the blame where the blame needs to be put. And I honestly to this day cannot say that the blame needs to be put to this council or this staff as it relates to this budget being presented. The facts are here, the information is here. I have not, in all the budget meetings that we've had, I have had not one individual talk to me or communicate to me or comment to me about that what we're doing is wrong or out of line or out of scope. They're wanting movement. And I think this council is doing movement with the support staff. So I think the more impression is that if we can provide that direction and provide the positives out of this deal, let's be honest, we can approve this tomorrow and there is going to be somebody that is not happy. It isn't going to matter. There will be a person, I guarantee it, there will be a person in the Wingham ward that is not happy that their taxes are going down.
Amen.
Because it's not enough, and because Don in the public meeting is going to say it's a one-time discussion. Chances are your taxes are going to go probably back up or a little bit up next year because of this one-time off. So no matter what, it's not enough. And that's the thing, it isn't going to matter what we do in that sense, but if we can continue to have this development, I think that is going to help survive and level load the discussion, and people want it. People have been wanting it for 20 years. We have now started seeing it, and thankful to, you know, Doug Searson and the people in there, that we're now starting to see it. The Rutland subdivision, those types of things in Blythe and East Wallinosh, Like, we wouldn't have had those. We haven't had those in 25 years. This council is, and the future is looking really bright for North Huron if we can continue the path that we're on, in my mind. So I think it's a great presentation from what you and staff have put together. There's been lots of discussion and hard looking at the mirror and saying, do we really need that? Do we really need this? And I take the information from all the councillors as there's some stake in this. You have some personal thoughts about it, and I'm glad for the discussion that we have. We're not always going to agree, but at the end of the day, we're all here for the same reason. And that's the part that I like about the discussion that we're having at this table. So thank you, Reeve.
Thank you, Trevor.
That's pretty great. My personal opinion of this whole process is I am grateful that we have the gatekeepers in our organization, like yourself, like our staff, to be able to get it to even what this is. Again, with the last budget we had, I was surprised at our second draft. I thought it was going to be a much harder process and much more malign than what we've had to deal with. I commend you on keep running a tight ship. We're eating puff wheat, but we're still eating, you know.
Yeah.
It comes to the big bags.
Rationing that now.
Yeah. No, I all I can add to the conversation is, I wish I could be this tight with my own budget, but then my wife's assessment of my spending is very low. But I just want to thank you to get this information in front of us. It's pretty cut and dried, and as Trevor said, and other councillors have said, a lot of this has nothing to do with us. It's what other governments have made, what other boards and assessments say we have to do, and we just have to toe the line as best we can and spend the tax dollars of our constituency as wisely as we can, and I'm confident that we're doing that.
Thank you.
Paul?
Yes, to you, Reeve. 40 years I've been here and my taxes have never gone down. And I'm the owner of that house at the top there, and it's come down.
That's a mistake.
It is worth more. I do believe though that you're going to see a reversal in the residential. It's going to change for sure. But no, it's great because at the ACTEV meeting yesterday morning there, what this town has to offer is unbelievable when you look at a lot of places and like hospitals. I don't think you mentioned the hospitals there. Schools, just so much stuff, and that's going to sell. That's going to draw people to this town. And as you say, it's big enough. It can hold them. So people down before us have done some good jobs at getting things built here. The policing is Councillor Deputy Reeve site mentioned to the policing. That's going to be interesting to see how that goes. As you say, it's all new for them too, and last year was all new for us. And I'll tell you, I just can't believe it looks like this. So I'm very happy with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anita?
Yeah, I don't have much to add. It's good, it's well thought out, we all put our input in it, and can't please everybody.
Thank you. So I'm just gonna touch on a few things. Our staff worked really hard to get us here. We didn't cut a lot of work that had to be done. We did not cut the roads in East Wawanosh, which is important to all of us. That's why I wanted to point that out earlier, because we know these things have to be done. So this council and the staff have not only come in with a great budget percentage, but we didn't cut everything to get here, and we didn't borrow everything to get here. We've done a great job as a team. In Blythe, what we're looking forward to the future is the new development, both at the north end of town. We've got the school, and behind the scenes there's another development that's a little too early to start talking about. That's going to help bring your taxes in line, because as is pointed out, we don't have to buy another plow, another grader. We have enough infrastructure to make it work. We're not going into debt. In East Wawanosh, with the Hutton Height we've been pushing, that's going to reduce your taxes in East Wawanosh, because Hutton Heights is in East Wawanosh. Every house we put up there is going to help, because we don't have to buy another grader or put another municipal building up. We just have to get it up and going. That's gonna help you there. At the county level, yes, there is the talk about the farmland, and it's said quite often that the residential was beat up for years and years, and now the farmland's getting beat up, and unfortunately it's bad timing because of the issues that Anita's picked out. But that cycle will come around, and that cycle never stops through eternity. Somebody's going to be picked on. It's just that you guys have had a prolonged amount of time, and we all do understand that. In the Wingham ward, we have the Maitland Estates coming along. Again, we don't have to buy another plow or put another building up. This is going to reduce taxes. It's what I call the long game, though. We can't see the benefits until maybe our last year, because I believe by the time it comes to our level for tax reduction, it takes about 3 years. Yeah, 3 years. So it may be the first year of the next council. They are going to have an amazing chance, because they'll have so much money coming in that they're not used to, that there could actually be another reduction, Paul.
Easier even.
But so we're sitting in a situation where we're all working together, we're moving forward. I think the staff has done a wonderful job. They didn't slash and burn. We've taken care of business, and I think 2.97 is an amazing number. And as far as what happens next year, we'll take it year at a time. But I agree with everyone that this, I believe you have a consensus, Donna, that 2.97 is something we can move forward on. I would ask one thing of staff. This is getting pretty late in the year for budgets. Could we have ours done by January 1st next year? Not January 1st.
Dwayne says yes.
You don't care, do you, Sean? Do you? But anyway, I would like to, if we could next year, just step it up a little faster, and then we'll get out of this pre-budget, because it does confuse us, okay?
We got off put by our January meeting schedule got mixed up there, and so that was, and as staff, as you know, we just need to get the first drafts out a lot earlier and have more of it done in January. It's always been the goal, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, but for sure.
Asset management should help you too, right? If we can get that moving along, because isn't that a lot of the time, it's really, if it's right there already, you know what you're doing as you move along, you just plug the numbers in there, right? So asset management is gonna help us all in that as we move forward. Okay, I hear a consensus that we're all happy with that, Donna, so I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, council, and I just wanna appreciate, you know, your time and your patience going through this, and it's really important, as I say, to ask questions and to make sure that you understand things, and I totally want you to do that for sure. I also want to thank the other staff. As I said, we're back and forth all the time. Okay, what can we do about this? What can we do about that? And we still have to, you know, one of our big worries is, okay, well, can we really get this done? Like, we have a lot on our plate. 2020 is going to be a heavy workload with all the projects that we have. So we're going to have to dig deep to be able to accomplish all of these. So I appreciate all of that. So if council is in agreement with where we are today, what I would like to do is have a motion brought forward to adopt the budget in principle, which would allow the staff to, they can start then preparing their RFPs and all of those sorts of things that they need to do. They wouldn't be able to award them until April 6th, then when the budget gets passed at the formal meeting, but they wouldn't be wasting their, like, they can be using this next bit of time to get their pricing in and then they ready to go then for April 6th, as we want to make sure that we get moving along on the project. So, and then I would prepare a public presentation. I welcome your feedback as to, you know, I usually try to keep it to 20 minutes to an hour as part of the regular council meeting. I don't, I mean, in past years, I have spent, I mean, I could talk budget for 2-3 hours, but nobody really loves it except me. So, I try to keep it to a half an hour, and then, at that time too, we could offer the public if they wanted to ask any questions or whatever, so that would be the plan. If we could, get a motion brought forward, then we would, get some work underway, award that work after the April 6th meeting, have the presentation at that meeting, adopt the budget, and away we go for 2020.
So I think we should have the budget read, or the motion read, go ahead, Carson.
That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby adopts the 2020 budget in principle and directs staff to have the budget be presented for final adoption at the April 6, 2020 regular meeting.
Do I have a mover? I have Paul and I have Kevin seconding, all in favor? Carries. Just before we go any further, there was something that was, we talked about doing yesterday, to give the council an idea of how busy this year has been. Was it
The building?
Yeah.
So Donna will have that development charges report on Monday.
Okay.
But basically, I think the piece you were wanting to highlight was that the development we've had in 2019 was the equivalent of what we've had in the past 7 years before that.
So we have had a very busy year, folks.
Wow.
7 times. Isn't that amazing? Go ahead, Trev.
Yeah, Ray, the only other thing I would suggest is, because on April 6th is the public meeting, right? And this is only a suggestion, is that this document, along with some social media, discussion out there to ask, between now and April 6th, any discussion or any comments that ratepayers have that they would like to pass them on to the respective council or staff or whatever. I think at the end of the day, then we've got a draft budget that was out there. This one is the proposed budget, approved budget. In my mind, that would give ratepayers 4 to 5 weeks of, if you want to look at it, here it is, and provide your feedback. Because what I find is always a struggle is April 6th, the discussion happens in this council chambers, and if somebody walks in that door with a thought process or a thought that we haven't thought of, now this proposed budget all of a sudden goes right back to the discussion about, oh, now it's not. And where I'm going is that if somebody comes to me with a thought or a suggestion that I haven't thought about, all I'm suggesting is that we pass that information on to staff and let staff vet that out before the April 6th meeting, so that if they think it's a good idea and they want to implement it on April 6th, then we can have the discussion on April 6th and change. I don't want to see us have to go April 6th, go back to the drawing board, have another discussion on April 20th when we don't really have to. Especially if we have 4 weeks where we're not going to be, in essence, talking about budget. The community and ratepayers can have lots of time to digest what this document is telling us, and if questions that they have for us as how we've been informed of how it's been put together. So, for me, it's just about transparency to the public and giving them a full composite approach about how this budget was put together. They can ask. There might not be any questions. There may be a lot. I have no idea. But I always struggle with the fact that we have the public meeting on the 6th, and then that's when potentially hope everybody comes with their questions and suggestions. And really the public says, well, it seems like it's too late because you've already temporarily approved the budget. Well, you're absolutely right, because this is the information we have. If you have other information, we may change. But we don't know that information until we get public opinion on it. So I think if we do that, in my mind, that gives us the idea that we are transparent and open to the public, but as well as it gives that public 4 weeks to really understand the budget on their own. And if they have questions, they can talk to Don and staff and councils to get some answers that they would like to see. And then on April 6th, we should be just a matter of reviewing what we've discussed. And that if we've already talked about it, the public meeting is really 20 minutes, it should be, in my mind, should be the longest we talk about it, because the public has had all the documentation, no different than what we're talking about today.
Thank you, Trevor. Carson's gonna speak now.
Yeah, through you, your worship, so Vicky and I were both nodding heads here, that's something that we can definitely pull together, between our departments. The other piece to that is, so if there are examples just like this one where council thinks it would be beneficial for us to post things like this, for the benefit of council and for the benefit of staff, let us know. Like, we're continuing to step up our communications efforts, so if there's examples like this where you think it would be for your benefit at the council table or for the benefit of staff, like, we are very open to that, and so don't hesitate to bring those forward to us.
Yeah, I don't think it's, just to agree, I don't think it's any benefit to us. We've got the information here and it's communicated and it's reported online. It's just a discussion that not everybody goes online. So let's try to talk to the whole community and find out ways, and whether we have a copy of it on the front table for people when they walk in the door. Like, stuff like that, to make it open so that they're looking for it. They're not necessarily looking for it, it's staring them right in their face. And if they wanna read it, great. If they don't, that's their prerogative. But at least now we're not shielding it from them, and they have the ability to provide common feedback. And if they want to provide it, great. If they don't, that's fine too.
So I'll just add to that, if it's okay, I'm sure it'll be okay with the council, but let's throw it out there. I think we should send out a press release to the 2 local papers in CKNX that we've tentatively agreed to a 2.97% tax increase in North Huron. Let's send that off in a news release if we can. Are we good with that?
So I make that the motion because there's advertising costs associated with it, so.
I was just thinking news release. Oh, for the other stuff.
For the
yes.
like the papers, right, so.
No, just a news
Press
release.
release.
Okay,
Press
oh,
release.
okay, yeah, that's.
Not an ad.
Okay.
No, yeah, just a press release, and they can get a hold of us if they want to, so be prepared, you may have press people calling you guys, but we know where you're going and what you're talking about. So we'll do that too. Okay, where was I? I lost track of where we were. Confirmatory bylaw. A bylaw number 27-2020, being a bylaw of the Township of North Huron to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by the Council Township of North Huron. And bylaw number 27-2020, being a bylaw of the Township of North Huron to adopt, confirm, I already said that. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin and I have Trevor seconding. Do I have all in favor? Carries. Adjournment that the Council of Township of North Huron agree to no further business before the council. The meeting here be by adjourned at 10:25. Do I have a mover? I have Nita, I have Trevor. All in favor? Carries. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, council.